Hey, it's Tiger, and in this video we're going to be talking about the Dsm-5 Controversy. And for those of you who do not know what the Dsm-5 is, it basically stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and it's the 5th edition. If you want to read the book, it's about 1,400 pages long. Yeah. When the Dsm-5 was first released in 2013, there was a ton of backlash, and it stirred a ton of controversy throughout the academic community. There was literally protests by psychologists. While the task force was trying to figure out the whole thing, you had like people quitting in the middle of the revised edition. They were just, I'm done, no more. Actually, I just have a trip to Bali. And of course, you know, multiple buildings were burnt down. That actually didn't happen. That was a lie, the last part. But you probably just like, okay, why are all these psychologists and academics just randomly protesting over a little book? Well, the reason has to mainly do with the fact that, okay, basically the Dsm-5 is just kind of a list of all the different mental disorders, right? If you want to diagnose your friend, you know, just come in. Here's clinical depression, check, 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 check. Schizophrenia, check. It pretty much has all the different possible mental disorders that you could ever imagine. But the reason for the kind of harsh reaction against those people who were involved in creating the Dsm-5 has to do with the fact that, well, the Dsm-5 seems to be very lenient with its definition of a mental disorder, right? In terms of, for example, depression, if you look in the Dsm-4, it was a lot harder, a lot more difficult to actually get that diagnosis than it is today. The Dsm-5 has stripped and broadened the definition of what it means to be depressed. And as a result, what ends up happening, you see something that we call false positive, which is essentially when you have a lot of people who are claiming that they qualify for these symptoms, when in reality, they don't really have any sort of disorder like that. The most important thing to understand here, though, is that it wasn't just about major depressive disorder. It was a ton of other disorders. The Dsm-5 essentially added far more possible disorders compared to previous versions, which of course is expected in some way. But what really was kind of unexpected was the fact that for many of the different diagnostic criterias, the bar was essentially lowered. And that's an issue because it pretty much just makes a mockery of what it means to have a mental disorder in the first place. And this is bad because what ends up happening is you have a 400% increase in the use of antidepressants in the past decade. Anybody, if they really want, can nowadays seem to get their hands on an antidepressant. And we're now at a stage where nearly 1/4 of women between the ages 40 and 50 are using an antidepressant. That's 25% of females, again, that are between the ages 40 and 50. And of course, this is not to say that depression in general does not really exist. That's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is that the criteria has just been lowered. Before, there seemed to be a pretty decent standard, but now it's just like, okay, let's let more people in. Let's allow more people to belong and get a diagnosis. Another really good example of this is ADHD, because with ADHD, it's pretty well documented within the academic literature that ADHD is one of the most overdiagnosed mental disorders in existence, especially in America. And it does seem to be the case that a lot of younger kids and students have incentives to actually qualify for that disorder because that allows them to get access to various stimulants like Adderall, which just up all night, just it boosts your performance, let's just say, a little bit. What's even more kind of crazy is that they actually reduced the age threshold, right? In the previous Dsm-4, you had to be, I believe, like 12 at the very least, but now I think they lowered it to like 7. You can get diagnosed with ADHD when you're 7. 1 in 5 boys nationally are currently diagnosed with ADHD. 1 in 5. That's 20%. This is not to say that ADHD does not exist. I think we have a lot of reason to say that yes, ADHD does to some capacity exist. But when you just start letting anybody in for any reason and you, again, start lowering the bar, you're going to get a lot of false positives. A lot of people who say that they kind of are at risk, but in reality, it's the symptoms that they have or display just really isn't that severe. You might be wondering right now, okay, so like, why did they do that? Like, why? We don't need more people who have mental disorders who don't really have mental disorders, because that just confuses the whole picture. And there have been a lot of different theories offered to answer that question. And one of them is a little bit corrupt, a little bit out there, and it's actually backed by some research. So you have to understand that at the end of the day, drug companies and pharmaceutical companies are making money the more diseases there are, right? The more people who are diagnosed with depression, that means the more people are going to have to purchase antidepressants. The more individuals identify with ADHD, the more prescriptions there's going to be for Adderall. Things actually get a lot more sketchy from here, guys, because if you actually look at the task force, which is made up of all the individuals who are in charge of revising and developing the DSM-5, it turns out that the vast majority of these people are psychiatrists, not psychologists, not even practicing psychologists for the most part. They're either research psychologists or psychiatrists. And psychiatrists tend to have more ties to pharmaceutical companies than people, for example, who are in clinical psychology, because you guys probably didn't know this, but if you have a major in clinical psychology, basically you can't give one of your clients any sort of medication, right? Only psychiatrists can do that. Psychiatrists are the people that see their clients for like 2 seconds, just like, so yeah, Prozac? Yeah, let's try that. Whereas if you're in clinical psychology, it's more kind of a practical approach where you are spending a lot more time one-on-one with these individuals, and you're actually trying to apply different therapies to help them recover from whatever disorder they suffer from. What's even more interesting is that if you take a look at the last DSM, right, the Dsm-4, it turns out that 57% of those involved on the panel to create the Dsm-4 had ties with the pharmaceutical companies. As for the Dsm-5, that number has actually increased to about 69%. There was also another interesting study that tried to analyze the behavior of psychiatrists who were given financial incentives by pharmaceutical companies. And it turns out that those who had received at least $5,000 in compensation from these pharmaceutical companies actually tended to give about 3 times more prescriptions. Anyway, guys, that's gonna wrap it up for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel because, yeah, I'm gonna be posting more content in the future. And also, I want you to comment down below and just kind of give me your own thoughts about this whole controversy, and even whether or not this has kind of changed your whole idea about the way mental disorders are diagnosed in America. But as always, guys, thanks for watching. Take care.